Hi everyone, welcome to We Are the Ancestors, a special mini-series produced for and within From Here with a View. We Are the Seeds Philadelphia podcast. My name is Nicolle Arthun, your host for these 4 episodes, and our guest today is Angela Cruz. Angela is a descendant of Filipino lineage. She is initiated as a spirit medium in the Shona tradition and a priest in the Palo and Lukumi, which are Afro-Cuban traditions. Welcome, Angela.
Hi, Nicolle. It's really nice to be here with you today.
Yeah, it's nice that you're here as well. We have a long history. We've met a couple years ago and some really interesting circumstances, and I've had a lot of time to get to know you through the years, and you've worked a lot with our team at Changing Woman Initiative. So can you tell me a little bit about what you do?
It can be a simple response. It's not always the simplest response, though. So when I'm working with people, my focus generally is with ancestral healing. So there's different aspects to ancestral healing that I focus on. A lot of it is intergenerational trauma. That's like a phrase that a lot of people like to reference these days. So for me, with intergenerational trauma, what I'm really trying to pinpoint is what are the patterns that are being revealed or manifested today in somebody's lifetime. And that can be manifested in different ways. It could be manifested physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. But then I try to understand where those manifestations actually originate from, or where do those patterns come from. So those patterns can come from either this lifetime, maybe things that have happened. A lot of times, though, I see that it comes from past lives of the individual as well as past generations, things that have been passed down from generation to generation.
So you and I met a couple years ago, I would say about 3 years ago, and we met in this really interesting circumstances because you were just you were in an isolation state because you had just gone through some ceremony, and I was meeting you in a restaurant, which of all the places you couldn't necessarily be.
Yeah.
And during that time, we were able to talk about who you are and the work that you do as an ancestral medicine person to support people's wellness. And can you tell me how you do that work as an ancestral medium healer, if even you call yourself that?
So as a medium, I'm able to access information that isn't necessarily at the surface. So like the way that I diagnose or the way that I assess or again access information more comes from my skills of being a medium and listening, hearing to people's ancestors, seeing their spirits that work with them. So it's not necessarily information that's coming from me as far as like what I think a person should do. I rely upon the advice and guidance and wisdom that our ancestors, or more specifically the person's ancestors, are providing, because they're really providing the pathway of healing. Because oftentimes people could be given information, but they don't know necessarily what to do with it or how to take a step forward. So that's a little bit of how I start working with the healing process with people.
So you and I do a lot of traveling, right? I've been to other communities, other tribes. I'm Diné. So we have our medicine people in our communities. For me, it was such a huge opportunity to open my mind about the different ways people heal and are healers and the medicine that they work with in their communities. But we also know there's a sense of false spirituality and shamanism that gets sold. And so how do you combat those kind of limited beliefs about what you do and how you do it?
How do I combat it? I generally try to be very careful of the spaces that I am in and the discussions that I'm a part of when it comes to spirituality. So even if it's like a casual discussion and if people start talking about spirituality, if I feel that the frequency or energy is not for me, I just don't even try to entertain it, or I don't try to insert myself or speak on it. I think it's important to be aware of extending energy unnecessarily. It's being discerning. Have to be really discerning. Yeah.
So, like I said, as somebody who's grown up around spirituality, like my mom would pray with cedar and sage over us when we were kids. I remember going to a peyote ceremony pretty early on when I was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6. it was really common for us to see a medicine person growing up, so it feels normal for me to engage in spirituality from the context of my Diné culture and belief system, because it's very much part of who we are. Right. And it's interesting, as a midwife and as an Indigenous Diné midwife in the community, our teachings around birth interweave in spirituality. Like, historically, we were medicine people. And so it feels very normal for me to engage someone like yourself to get protection, healing, and guidance when making decisions. So you work with pregnant women through your medicine as well. Can you talk about that?
I think it's a blessing to be able to work with pregnant women, you know, because it's ancestral work, right? So it's like we're the physical vehicles and the portals for new ancestors coming through. And so for me, I just feel like if there is guidance or wisdom that their ancestors can share, you know, whether it's for the birthing person, their families, for the child that's being born, I'm all in, you know, because it just means that I'm being given an opportunity also to share my gifts. So not only is it beneficial for the people, I think it could be beneficial for them, it's also an opportunity for me to share my gift and like be in the space that, I don't know, it's one of the spaces that bring me the greatest joys. It can take different shapes and forms. Maybe it just means holding the birthing person's hand. If that's all that I'm being asked to do, I'll do it. You know, so I think a lot of it is surrendering to what is being asked. Like, what is Spirit asking for there to occur, and how can I fulfill what is being asked? So it's also like laying down your ego, just leaving your ego far, far away, so that you can do whatever it is that needs to be done.
I think something that gets lost in this work that you do is, you know, you have this ethereal life, you look a certain way, you sound a certain way, but like what I often find when I meet healers and medicine people throughout the world is they're just like us. Like, they have real life problems like us, they have health problems, they have money problems, and then they have this beautiful gift to help people. But there is also this process of like, you can just take a shaman class and become a medicine person, but it doesn't work that way, right? Like, there's other parts of this that nobody talks about. Like, do you feel comfortable talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's no, that's like a joke, a running joke that my partner and I have, where it's like fast track, because you can see people going on like 6-week process, get a certification, you're a shaman afterwards, you can go out there and monetize. Right? But like the real work is your life's work. There's a lot of pain that occurs. You have to go through a lot of pain. You have to go through a lot of hardship and sacrifice and suffering. And then you still have to choose whether or not you want to be a medicine person. For me, I've found that it's such a blessing now at this point in my life to be able to do this work, like to be able to fulfill my life's path. I think one of the things it comes down to is the lack of understanding that eldership is very, very important. Like, these medicine ways actually come from somewhere. I was saying this the other day, they're like keys that unlock doors. They also will attune your energies in particular ways that your spirits and guides and your ancestors want you to attune your spirits. That's been passed down. So also the blessing that we actually have access to it. Why do we have access to it? Because it's medicine people that have held these lineages. People have died holding these lineages, or, you know, people have died because they were medicine carriers. So that's another important thing to remember, is the amount of sacrifice that has happened for us to even be where we are. When people say that I took a course and I can do this, you know, maybe that's correct, because I definitely don't want to diminish that something incredible has happened for somebody taking a certification. But I also feel there is lack of paying homage and acknowledging elders that have carried medicine ways for thousands of years.
It's interesting to see the up-and-coming folks not give and not acknowledge or honor where their information came from. Right, there was like an article that came out recently about a birth that happened on Navajo reservation, and some of the birth workers were talking about things covering their head and their womb, but like they didn't, why are they doing that? Where did that come from? Having worked with Patricia Gonzalez, who's a medicine woman in Arizona, she gave us the teaching of why we cover our head and our womb when we're doing birth work. So often when I talk about those things, it's like it came from her, she taught me, right? Another medicine, Diné, medicine on Navajo Nation, like she gave more teachings about teas and things we need to take care of ourselves in pregnancy and birth and postpartum. And she gave me that story and those teachings. And so I think one of the missing elements of the teachings is honoring where that information came from.
Yeah.
Because it has a life, right? And you're carrying that information now. You don't own it. Yeah. But like by honoring your teachers, by talking about where it came from, like that's so important, and it's not being done.
I think it's also like being in reciprocity. Like those relationships are reciprocal relationships. So even if medicine people or elders have passed away, even if they've crossed through the other side, saying their names out loud and honoring them and acknowledging them, continuing to give them offerings, you know, so that they're given light, so that they still have healing taking place on the other side, so that they still have strength on the other side. You give to them so that they can also give to us as well, which they already have and continue to do. So it's like making sure that the relationships stay intact through reciprocity as well.
How has the work that you're doing as an ancestral medium and healer humbled you in how you work with people?
If I want to be able to persevere or have a long life doing this work, I need to take care of myself first. So it's very humbling, because then it starts to talk to, do you love yourself? Do you value yourself? Are you worthy of self-care? Like you give all this care to other people, are you giving it to yourself? I mean, and the other space of humility is knowing that, again, that you're just being a vessel, and that's it. Like if you can surrender to being a vessel for God or for spirit or for your ancestors or source, or being a vessel for love, and you realize that that is what you're doing, there's nothing else you can do other than surrender and be humble.
The other question I have for you is like, how do you navigate friendships?
My first like closest friend is my partner, my husband. I mean, that's like the one that I can count on, the one that I know that has my back. After that, I have people that I'm close to, but I'll be honest, this is a very solitary path for me in a lot of ways, you know. So you find people that you feel that you can open up to and really share with. Like you're one of those people, which has like been a blessing for me. It's like I can be myself, but also the thing is that you respect my space, you know, and that's probably because you came up with the teachings that you came up with. I'm not, you know, I don't have a very social life because I'm committed to the work. So that means that I have to actually take a lot of space for myself. Like I need quiet time. Like after I work with people, because there's so much outpouring, I need to actually just like be quiet. I need to go and water my plants. I need to sit still and just like listen to the wind.
You said something just now that made me think about how important it is to ask permission. Like when you work with folks on their healing journey, there's a part of that where you ask permission to work with them. Like obviously they seek you out for advice and knowledge, guidance, but even as you're working with someone, there is a process of asking permission from the ancestors, theirs, yours, and then also the individual of like, is it okay if we do this? And I think that's a very valuable point that I'm trying to make, because sometimes in this world of false spirituality, there's people who just want to like tell you things and not ask permission, right? And that's not how it works, right? Even if I were to go see a medicine person on my territory in the Navajo reservation, there's a process of me asking for their help and for me showing up. And even when I'm there, there's a protocol of asking for how I'm going to ask for their help and guidance. I guess that asking, how valuable that asking permission part is for you.
It's like, so it's like an invitation, right? So you can invite an individual's elevated ancestors to be present in this space. Like if I do a reading, I'm going to invite them. I'm going to ask them if they would like to be present. Those that resonate with the prayers, those that resonate with this work. But they have an invitation, which means that there's choice involved. So they can say no if they want to. But I think that that's sovereignty also weaves its way into asking permission and being given consent. Because if somebody's sovereignty or autonomy is not respected, then people are not going to ask permission. When you're speaking about learning through, okay, this is why tradition is very important as well, because you learn how to come respectfully. You don't just go to a medicine person, like you're saying, expecting that they're going to give you the, advice, guidance, or wisdom. You come in a way where it's like not just honoring the medicine person, you're honoring, because you're understanding there's all those that they work with. Because it's not just a medicine person that's going to be providing the healing or whatever it is that you're coming for. It's all of those that work with the medicine person as well. So if there's that lack of understanding right there, then humility is already out the door. Permission, autonomy, sovereignty is really, really important, because it's also related to somebody having boundaries. And a lot of times these days people have trouble establishing their personal boundaries, or establishing like, this is my sovereign space, or being able to say, no, thank you, and that translates a lot into spiritual work as well, because we're talking about spiritual work. So if we don't have our own boundaries with individuals, human individuals, it becomes very difficult to have boundaries with spiritual beings or entities or energies.
Would you consider yourself a patient person?
I think it depends. I have patience. I have patience for those that want to learn, those that are respectful. I have patience for those that are kind. I have patience for those that I do have patience, and then I don't have patience when there's just nonsense, and I'm just, No, thank you.
I think it's a funny question, because again, when we met, like that first time, wasn't it a full year before we talked to each other again? Yeah. Literally was. I think somebody recommended that I reach out to you, or they had a group thread. Yeah.
And then it was a year later where I kept hearing your name in my head, and I was like, okay, let me reach out to her because I'm hearing her name. And then we tried to connect, and just didn't happen. And then it was another year later that, so we were on this like yearly cycle with each other for a little while. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important to know, because my community, my friends and my family, especially when I worked with Changing Women, because you worked with all of our staff and some of our board members. And I think one of the comments I got from someone was like, Nicolle, how do you run into these people? And that was a funny question, because I'm like, I don't know if I run into them, or if they run into me, or how that happens. I feel like when I started doing this work as an Indigenous midwife years ago, I had offered a prayer and asking for mentors in traditional medicine. And at the time, my view about medicine was very limited, because how people are trained on the Navajo reservation and in the Pueblo community I was in at the time, it's a very closed community. Like, there's a whole initiation process. It's years of your life. It's not common that women are brought into that space, and if you are, you're a helper. And so I knew, because I didn't live on my reservation and I was in someone else's community, that I wasn't going to have access to that medicine in the same way. And so I had to be open to some of the teachings I wanted to learn, to however and wherever I was going to receive it. And it's funny because in my humanness, I thought it would be one person, and it's actually many people, many teachings over a life, like 10, 20 years so far. And I've had to be very patient with being open to where it's coming from. And I think that's the part when I talk about limited thinking about spirituality, is we assume that as a healer, you're going to look a certain way, you're going to sound a certain way, you're going to walk around with certain type of clothing all the time. And that's not true. I find a lot of healers, like I said, are normal people like the rest of us, and they don't go around advertising what they do. They're really held up by their community. And so for me, having met you and then met you again a year later, like there's just this time thing that I have nothing to do with, but the timing was right for us to meet, and that I was in a space in my own development that I was ready to receive what you had to tell me. I think what was most powerful for me during one of our times that we talked about was you were telling me, or at least who you were working with at the time, one you were working with, the ancestors, was telling me basically putting the protocols I had learned through the years into practice, and that I needed to work with it in a certain way. And for me, because I'd had multiple teachers with different people, I had been shown their practice and their protocol and how they took care of themselves. But for once, you were the final piece for me of like, you were bringing it together for me on how to take care of myself and how to use what they had taught me in my practice of healing and working with people, but working and taking care of myself. And I'd never been told that before. And so to me, it's like all the pieces came together when I needed it to move on to the next part of my life. And so I can imagine when I talk about patience, like I say, I'm not the most patient person either. I'm patient at birth, but I'm not patient everywhere else. Being able to meet you and to have you provide guidance for me during my times of transition. And I can only imagine the people that you work with trust you, and that those who are guided to share your wisdom or the experience they've had with you with them, and they get to seek you out, there's a level of trust there. Like my team at CWI, obviously they trusted me to seek you out on their own. And that's sometimes what I do. My family laughs because I bring people home for sweat lodge a lot or for ceremony, because I see they need help. And I will connect folks with healers because I know they need help. That's a really hard place to be, because again, in this space of spirituality being kind of, some people have a false kind of, how do I say, persona of being a healer or a spiritual person, or even just that name can elicit not a comfortable response from people sometimes. Being able to navigate in community space safely, but that we're connecting the right people with healers that have been vetted and are trusted. How do you manage that?
I think that just shows up in the space because I don't have expectations, but also I feel like I'm also really just sensitive to people's experiences in life. You know, because when people come to me, they're having challenging experiences on whatever level it is. And even the fact that they're willing to come into a space and be vulnerable, like I have to honor that myself immediately, that somebody's willing to come and be vulnerable and share things about themselves, you know. And I think that in that space, somebody can feel that, somebody understands it. You know, there's no judgment. There's a lot of things that people go through, you know, so I never have any judgment over what it is. There's never, I don't feel like I ever, for me, it's never like, oh, you did something wrong. It's never like that. It's just like, okay, there's these experiences that we're meant to grow from and grow with. So what are the advice from our ancestors and spirits so that we can help you to grow? Because if you came to this space, you're asking for help in order to grow. So how can we do that? And I think the trust that occurs is because they understand that somebody's actually wanting to help them in whatever way is possible. So yeah, trust is a really, really important thing, because I also have to, as part of the patience, you watch somebody. So if they've been given advice through a reading or through a session, or the ancestors say something, and you just watch them to see if they're able to follow through, or how they're able to follow through. Do they come back for help? And some people, it can take them a moment to follow through with the advice given, or they do it right away or accomplish it right away, and then you get to build upon the relationship with each other. So that's why I think happened with you and me, is because it took some years of us just checking in with an arm's length.
Yeah.
And I think that's a little bit of how trust was built between us. Because then when we finally started talking, it was just you and I just being like, here we are. I came in one of my most vulnerable states, meeting you. And you did too. So we were, and then there's also the we're both coming with that, with the perception that we're meant to meet in this space. Right. If I choose to meet somebody, if I agree to meet somebody, there's a purpose for it. There's a purpose for it, and so I'm meeting in that space of faith with the person.
Hello listeners, Zachariah here. I just wanted to share one of my favorite sites for buying Indigenous art and learning about Indigenous artists. An Indigenous woman-owned and operated business, ProjectAntelope.com is an innovative online marketplace that features fine arts, fashion, books, music, and home goods. If you like to support Indigenous art and artists, ProjectAntelope.com is a great place to start. Tell them I sent you.
How do you stay grounded?
How do I stay grounded?
Yeah, because you have 1 foot ancestral space, right? Healing, which is dimensions and time.
Yeah.
There's things that don't line up. And then you've got this earth space. There's things happening. You got bills on dia paid, and it's a 3D space.
Yeah.
So how do you stay grounded being in that kind of life space? I don't know how to just describe it.
I know what you mean. Honestly, it's my spiritual work. It's my spiritual work. It's like understanding that spirit manifests in this physical form. So what am I supposed to do in this physical form that helps me stay grounded? I'm going and doing some spiritual baths, or I'm going and doing some ceremonies to help me remove toxins from my body, or the implements that I work with also. But I also am very careful about being around energies that could potentially create chaos. And I can feel it. If I'm in someone's space and the energy around me starts to whirl and swirl and I start feeling a certain way, I'm not going to be there. Yeah. So I'm careful of who I'm around. I'm careful of transference of energy. I'm careful who I touch. Yeah. Careful what I eat. But that's also because I choose it. I want to have a good life. I want to have a healthy life. I want to be able to be present in a good way for people. I want to be a good mother. I want to be a good partner, and so that means having discipline also of doing the things that you need to do so you can show up in those ways. Yeah.
Is there any question that I haven't asked you that you're like, ooh, I would really like people to know this?
Well, you touched on this earlier, but I definitely want to encourage that if somebody feels that they have gifts or are trying to understand what is happening with them, I have these dreams, or I know that I'm psychic, or I resonate with water, or I'm always called to this and that, find somebody that can mentor you. Put the prayer out and wait for that person to come. Make sure you vet the person also. Don't just expect that just because a healer or a medicine person comes to you that they're the one. Make sure you ask good questions, you want to also find out how they are in their own lives as well, because sometimes healers separate themselves from their personal lives. I think it's important that there isn't separation in that way, because oftentimes there can be, a healer can present themselves in a particular way. They can have one face and then they have another face. So you want to see what the different faces are of people. But I think mentorship and guidance is important. That way you can actually work with your gifts in a safe way. That's really important, because we need more of that. We need more people that are here to support healing, the evolution of the planet, evolution of human species, all of that. But we still need guidance, right?
So it sounds like being a good ancestor, even when you're not wearing your hat of your healer side of things.
Yeah, always walking the right path, or like doing the best you can to walk a good path, I think.
I feel like people are very hungry to be connected to traditional medicine. There's been a resurgence of needing connection in the past couple of years is what I've noticed. And it's kind of interesting to observe, because I know some of these teachings, well, a majority of the ones that are really medicine teachings, like that's more of a short demo they're providing on how to do it. Like really the teachings and the understanding of how and why you do things is a lifetime of learning, and you're not going to learn that in 30 minutes or in a demo at an event. And that you really do need to spend time with a healer learning it from them, because you can harm people. And I think that's another side that people are not aware of is you can harm people with your touch or your thoughts or with I guess I would call bad energy. That is another kind of teaching that I've learned through the years that isn't explicit, right? It's not like there's a warning label like don't do these things. It's like I've had to observe and learn through being in place with people to understand what the teaching is. And I think that's the part of ancestral medicine that can be challenging for people, because how do you describe an experience? Because the experience is the teaching, right? But it's not always in words or in a book or in a text. It's like you're learning as you're going through it how to behave, how to speak, how your body responds.
Through experience.
Right, and you're learning, but you're also learning things in that process, like patience, right? How to take care of yourself. You're learning to also deal with discomfort, which some people have a challenge with, cannot sit through discomfort.
So embodied practices that only can occur when you're there in the spaces. It's like direct transmission also from whoever it is that's sharing. But like you're saying, it takes time, and things you can only learn by just being present in the ceremonial spaces or in the learning spaces that are being provided by the teachers or the practitioners. You know, like some people want to say, where can I read this from? Like I've been asked that several times in the last few days, and I literally, you can read some things, but reading it doesn't mean that you truly understand it. Like reading it doesn't mean that you actually know how to work the practice. You know, so you learn how to work the practice around other practitioners, elder practitioners. You learn by sitting, being quiet, listening, watching, you know, not interrupting and you know, not inserting yourself. Like you learn actually when you're in those actual spaces of practice, and not necessarily, you know, because you read it in a book and now you know. And I think that's one of the things too, is be careful about what you read, because also that information is coming from a source also, and what is the source that you're reading from. So you want to just be aware. Some sources are amazing and some sources are actually incorrect. Like there's stories where anthropologists have gone into indigenous communities asking, what is this? And literally the communities will give, the informant, right, will give the anthropologist the wrong answer on purpose to protect the people, you know, and also because the person, the anthropologist wouldn't understand anyways.
Well, thank you for giving me so much information and being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for
inviting
having me.
us to your home and your space. It's actually very comfortable here. You can hear the wind chimes in the background. I like that. I can see your little plant friends around. And I'm like, I feel peaceful just sitting here with you. Yeah, thank you for being with us and being on our podcast today. Would you like to share a little bit about the practice that you work through right now?
Sure, thanks for asking. The name of my practice is Ndoro Healing Arts. So that's Ndoro, Healing Arts. If somebody's interested in ancestral practices or learning how to work more with their ancestors, or trying to understand how to deepen into intergenerational healing, work with their gifts, they can give me a call or look us up online if they want more information. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of From Here with a View, a We Are the Seeds Philadelphia podcast. Please subscribe, share with a friend, and leave us a review. You'll be helping us grow our listener community and elevate the impact of our podcast. You can learn more about this podcast at wearetheseeds.org. From Here with a View is executive produced by Michelle St. John with Zachariah Julian and Tyler Nagoyo producing. Sound mixing and original theme music by Zachariah Julian. To listen to more from Zachariah, follow him on Spotify and Apple Music. From Here with a View logo art was inspired by an original oil pastel drawing by artist Jason Weesaw. Graphic design by Fernanda Leon. This podcast was funded in part by Independence Public Media Foundation. We'll see you next time on From Here with a View.